Welcome back, March 10th, 2021. A couple of things, one immediately political, another memory and thought on children's literature and the culture. First, let me broadly quote Betsy McCoy. President Biden's health honcho, Rochelle Walensky, announced Monday that vaccinated Americans can visit with other vaccinated Americans in small groups at home. But when Walensky was asked about visiting grandchildren, she said no, unless the kids are local. Even vaccinated people must avoid traveling, the director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention insisted. Quote, every time there's a surge in travel, we have a surge in cases in this country, close quote. The Biden administration is making one exception, however. It's okay to wade across the Rio Grande River and enter the U.S. legally. Even if you have COVID-19, you can get on a bus in a Texas border town and travel to any part of our nation. Never mind how far and wide COVID-infected migrants spread the virus as they fan out. On the travel question, Biden's double standard is mind-boggling. It's a firm no for granny, but a warm yes for illegal immigrants. Since Biden took office, he has rapidly dismantled Team Trump policies that kept migrants in Mexico during the pandemic. Some 100,000 migrants surrendered to U.S. border officials in February, up from 78,000 in January. The total figure is likely to reach 1 million this year, assuming this trend continues. Some single adults are sent back to Mexico, but families are permitted to stay. After a few days of processing in a detention center, officials grant them documents to travel and release them into a Texas border town. From there, nonprofits like Catholic Charities get them bus tickets to their destination of choice. Here's the hitch. The feds refuse to test migrants before release unless they're visibly sick, even though COVID continues to rage in Mexico. Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki, explains that the administration considers testing a state or local responsibility. That's ridiculous. Even today, Joe Biden gave a press conference on vaccinations. Why would the president give press conferences on state and local responsibilities? Some cities, like Brownsville and El Paso, are using rapid tests to identify COVID-positive migrants. Other cities don't test. But either way, city officials explain they have no authority to stop infected migrants from traveling. Only the feds do. When Brownsville, Texas, officially tested migrants last month, more than 6% tested positive. Some were willing to quarantine at local hotels paid for by charities, but many boarded buses for other parts of the country. 6% sounds small, but 6% of 1 million migrants adds up to 60,000, spanning out across the nation, unhindered. And exposing bus riders en route, of course. Last week, Greyhound CEO David Leach demanded assurance from Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas that undocumented migrants boarding buses in Texas have tested negative. So far, no response. Meanwhile, Team Biden continues to apply the brakes on American life returning to normalcy. Government virus guru Anthony Fauci has warned this is no time to relax. Biden accused the governor of Texas of Neanderthal thinking for ending the Lone Star State's mask mandate, and the CDC warns Americans to avoid all travel to Guatemala and other Central American countries, even as the government invites migrants from those same countries into our homeland. Travelers flying into the United States must have a negative COVID-19 test before boarding, and another negative test is recommended after landing, but illegals get a free pass to bring the novel virus to a bus terminal near you. Why is this happening? Radical open borders advocacy groups have taken over the White House, and they get what they demand, no matter how extreme. Instead of working with Congress and hearing out open borders opponents, Biden issues executive orders shutting off any debate. Representative Henry Cuellar, D. Texas, whose district runs along the border, warned that White House officials should not only listen to the immigration advocates and activists, but also to the public affected by open border policies. The facts prove they're dangerous to our health. As you see with the Biden administration, the only danger to America is from Americans. At least that's their thinking. Now, on a totally, completely different note, one of my favorite authors passed away, Norton Juster. He wrote one of the great children's books of all time, The Phantom Tollbooth. It's about the fantasy travel of a boy, Milo, and his dog, Talk. One of my favorite chapters is about a place called Digitopolis, where you sleep to become tired and you eat to become hungry. It goes something like this, but bear with me for a message at the end. This is one of my favorite excerpts from the book. Milo, as he finished his 7th helping of food, said, "Each bite I take makes me a little hungrier than the one before." "Do have some more," suggested the mathematician, and they continued to eat just as fast as he could fill the plates. After Milo had eaten 9 portions, Talk, his dog, 11, and the humbug, without once stopping to look up, 23, the mathematician blew his whistle for a second time, and immediately the pot was removed, and everyone returned to work. "Ugh," gasped the bug, suddenly realizing that he was 23 times hungrier than when he started. "I think I'm starving." "Me too," complained Milo, whose stomach felt as empty as he could ever remember. "And I ate so much." "Yes, it was delicious, wasn't it?" agreed the pleased dodecahedron, wiping the gravy from several of his mouths. "It's the specialty of the kingdom. Subtraction stew. I have more of an appetite than when I began," said Talk, leaning weakly against one of the larger rocks. "Certainly," replied the mathematician. "What did you expect? The more you eat, the hungrier you get. Everyone knows that." "They do?" said Milo, doubtfully. "Then how do you ever get enough?" "Enough," he said impatiently. "Here in Digitopolis, we have our meals when we're full and eat until we're hungry. That way, when you don't have anything at all, you have more than enough. It's a very economical system. You must have been quite stuffed to have eaten so much." "It's completely logical," explained the dodecahedron. "The more you want, the less you get, and the less you get, the more you have. Simple arithmetic, that's all. Suppose you had something and added something to it. What would that make?" "More," said Milo quickly. "Quite correct," he nodded. "Now suppose you had something and added nothing to it. What would you have?" "The same," he answered again without much conviction. "Splendid," cried the dodecahedron. "And suppose you had something and added less than nothing to it. What would you have then?" "Famine," roared the humbug, who suddenly realized that that was exactly what he'd eaten 23 bowls of. "Oh, it's not as bad as all that," said the dodecahedron from his most sympathetic face. "In a few hours you'll be nice and full again, just in time for dinner." "Oh dear," said Milo, sadly and softly. "I only eat when I'm hungry." "What a curious idea," said the mathematician, raising his staff over his head and scrubbing the rubber and back and forth several times on the ceiling. "Next thing you'll have us believe is that you only sleep when you're tired." And by the time he'd finished the sentence, the cavern and all the workers and the dodecahedron had vanished, leaving just the 4 of them standing in the workshop. "I often find," he casually explained to his visitors, "that the best way to get from one place to another is to erase everything and begin again. Please feel like you are at home." I think in a way, if you lived in the Soviet Union in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s, or any communist country really, this would not be satire. That all said, it is for Americans perhaps explained by the classic the classic text on fairy tales, which is The Uses of Enchantment by psychiatrist Bruno Bettelheim. He writes this: "For a story to truly hold the child's attention, it must entertain him and arouse his curiosity. But to enrich his life, it must stimulate his imagination, help him to develop his intellect and to clarify his emotions, be attuned to his anxieties and aspirations, give full recognition to his difficulties, and at the same time suggest solutions to the problems which perturb him. In short, it must at one and the same time relate to all aspects of his personality, and this without ever belittling, but on the contrary giving full credence to the seriousness of the child's predicaments, while simultaneously promoting confidence in himself and in his future. In all these and many other respects of the entirety of children's literature, with rare exceptions, nothing can be as enriching and satisfying to child and adult alike as the folk fairy tale. True, on an overt level, fairy tales teach little about the specific conditions of life in modern mass society. These tales were created long before it came into being. But more can be learned from them about the inner problems of human beings and of the right solutions to their predicaments in any society than from any other type of story within a child's comprehension. Since the child at every moment of his life is exposed to the society in which he lives, he will certainly learn to cope with its conditions, provided his inner resources permit him to do so. That's the key, developing the inner resources of a child to be able to carry through whatever the conditions of life. Based on tales from yesterday or 2,000 years ago, this is not an unserious issue. If we're going to fix society or our politics, our culture, how many times have we spoken about how much more front-loading we need to be? God bless our efforts on college campuses, as we spoke about yesterday, but the problems to address with our youth start much earlier, much younger. The left understands that. Why do you think nobody ever talks about the conservative or right-wing education system in America, the Republican or conservative or right-wing teachers' unions? Why do you think the left has infused and suffused our curriculum? The truth is, the unions, the education system, none of it should be politicized, but politicized they have become, and by one side. Less Cartoon Network, please. Less BLM curricula, please. Less Ibram Kendi teaching toddlers about race through Netflix, please. Less Teen Vogue, please. More Norman Jesters and Phantom's Tollbooth, please. Please. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.